reason why we have social anxiety, because we just haven't practiced the art of mingling. And I hear this from so many people where it's so hard to leave a group or a conversation that is not exciting them. When you are communicating with someone and you feel like that connection is complete, what most people do not realize is that you do not have to stay in the same group the whole night. Here's what you can do. Hey loves, do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are tuning into this. It helps grow the show more than you know. Thank you so much again and enjoy. Today, I want to start by sharing this affirmation. I am a beacon of love. As I grow to love and respect myself, I emanate love to everyone around me. This is from our powerful card deck, actually, my affirmation card deck that has an action step on the back and an affirmation on the front. And I love these, and you can grab them at that'snowwhat.com if you're curious about them. Now, I'm curious about, for those of you who have been writing in around, Neeta, help me get tips around social anxiety. And how come I clam up, or I feel like I do not want to be part of the crowd when I am going to social networking events? I know that this is the time. There are going to be tons of different events, maybe house parties, maybe new networking events that you have to probably go to in order to differentiate yourself, or maybe even meet new people. And maybe, just like me, at some point in my life, and this was very, very early on, when I was so afraid to share my thoughts, I was so afraid to share my voice. While I always was a good community builder, I would bring people and make them feel seen in my home. When I would go to other people's events, I would get really shy. And I don't know about you, but it definitely didn't help, because I would just try to cling to the only person that I knew, or the first person that I would talk to. And clearly there is something wrong with that on every scale of things, because, well, what if that person that you're talking to or you're clinging to when you first get into this networking event is probably not going to be that person that is going to either you're not getting into the best conversation, or you're not really jiving, or it's kind of like getting into the dead zone, but maybe you are too afraid of branching out of that you stay in that same corner the entire night. And you know who you are, because you've done that. I've done that before. Or maybe you've noticed somebody who stands alone by themselves in a corner of a networking group, an event, and you, for whatever reason, don't go up to them to make them feel seen, heard, or curious about who they are. And I want to give you some pointers here. If this is you, that you have this social anxiety, maybe before an event, you think of thousands of reasons why you shouldn't go. I'm going to make it so easy for you, because as we navigate the holidays, and this goes into navigating going to, maybe you're visiting your in-laws or your in-laws' family, or a coworker's family event that you don't really get along with, but you have to do it for whatever reason, right? There's something you're obliged to go. And you know, mamas, at the end of the year, there's all of these mom events that you're going to, and maybe some of them you're excited about, some of them you're like, I don't know, I don't have anything in common with these people. I mean, the list goes on. And we can even check in with our bodies and say, okay, do I have to really go? Or maybe you want to go. Because we have a choice, always. We have a choice. We can sit on our couch in our pajamas, or we can do something completely different. And maybe you're in this era or season of life where you're like, I am going to push my comfort. I am going to expand beyond my discomfort, lean into my edges, and see how I can be more social. And my husband is a beautiful example of this. A few years ago, I think this was before or around the birth of my daughter, our second child, he made a point and he was like, I am going to go to some of these events, because he's an ultra introvert. He doesn't like going to these things. He doesn't like small talk. He is the one that will sit in the same corner with the same person. Doesn't matter how boring that conversation is with that one person. He will stick through it and he will white knuckle it and then at the end of the evening, he's like, oh my gosh, why did I stay there the entire time? He just didn't feel comfortable going and making the rounds because he didn't know how to do that. And for a lot of introverts, they share the same thing. They are not going to go into superficial conversations because that's not who they are typically. So if you are married to one, if you are in relationship with one, you have to learn how to really understand and know what their love language is to be able to say, okay, I hear you and I am with you. And here is how to make those interactions so much easier. So the first one is shift your focus from yourself and how awkward you are and how you don't want to go and how, all of these other things that we have in our mind to other people. And when we are focusing our attention to others, we are much more likely to figure out, okay, and get curious, become an investigator, become an investigative reporter, and really try to understand, okay, where's the other person coming from? What can I learn about that person? And now it's become a game. Anytime my husband and I, we go to certain events, it's like, how many people can we actually meet? And we understand maybe 3 different things about who they are. And then we'll report back at the end of the night. Did you meet anybody interesting? What did you chat about? What did you discover about them that they didn't understand about themselves? And by the way, feel free to write any of this down and maybe report back either in the comments or tag us on Instagram and let us know what has worked for you. Because I've found when you gamify it, I know it's super nerdy. I think a lot of times you then get to see, oh wow, yeah, this person was super kind of closed off or resistant, but then because you're making it about the other person, you don't feel as bad, awkward thinking or self-criticizing yourself or self-judging yourself from being too open or being too closed off. And I think a lot of times then you, instead of being nervous in getting to know the other person, you're actually curious, and that curiosity builds more presence, and that presence dissipates any feelings of awkwardness or the fact that maybe you're uneasy in having that conversation. And guess what? You get to realize that, oh, it's not so bad. Actually, that person probably has the same insecurities as I do, and we're all here together, and we probably don't even like the fact that we have to be here, but we have to be here for X, Y, and Z reason. And so at least we can have fun around it. What if your role is to make the other person feel really good about themselves? And if that is your only role, I guarantee you're going to dissipate any feelings of social anxiety right away. And this happens also. There was a very long time ago when I had first initially met Ajit's family, and they all speak Hindi fluently. And, they're Marwari, so they also speak a dialect of Hindi that is from the Rajasthan region, which I don't really speak or understand. And my Hindi is super broken. Even my mother-in-law makes fun of me sometimes because she's like, she only knows like 4 words in Hindi. Do not talk to her in Hindi because they speak so proper. And I speak like I am 4 years old with a very big slang. And so when I would go to these extended family parties where I'm supposed to hold my own, I a lot of times had this weird feeling of, just an insecurity and am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to embarrass them? Because I didn't want to do any of those things. But I also am bold and loud in my own right. And I also didn't want to come across as not having an opinion or a voice, but I did not know how to communicate it, obviously in Hindi, but also in a way that's not going to be demeaning or disrespectful. But then I just leaned in and I was starting to ask people questions about themselves. So literally turning the onus on them. I didn't care about my ability to speak Hindi or not. And a lot of times people actually found it funny. And at the end of the day, I didn't really care what they thought about me because that wasn't mine to carry or own. However, the fact that I had to check in with myself to see, okay, am I doing this to get my likes, meaning appreciation and love from my, in-laws and their family, or am I doing it to try to get to know this person? And I found that a lot of times they did understand what I was saying, and we were able to communicate, and it was fun, and it was, a brief interaction, but it worked. And so I think a lot of times we underestimate the power of trying to understand other people, and then in turn we forget the true essence of just connecting in general. So the other tip that I want to give is, the second tip is to go into these by preparing a few small conversation starters. And if you go on thatsucknowwhat.com, you can actually order your conversation card deck. And now I have brought these to many family parties, and I'm just going to pick 2 questions here that you can actually read for your next function that you are going to, that maybe you don't know anyone, or it's a new group that you're going to, and they will be a small conversation starter. These are really small. They come in 44 prompts, and they're great because you can actually use this, and this can actually combat your social anxiety because you have prompts to actually ask. So these are pre-conversation starters, or these are small ones that you can actually add or share in a group. You can leave them on a dinner table, coffee table, etc. First question: what is something that everyone admired about you as a kid, and why? And what I love, the ones that we created, is this one is from your upbringing. And while some people can go deep with these, most people can actually be superficial about it if you are not wanting to create that dynamic, or if you're not feeling as comfortable to go deeper. But this is a question, like, who doesn't want to know about themselves as a child? And, it's fun, it's light, it can be humorous, it can be comical, something that you could actually play around with. The other one, this is another really good one. This is from the current environment section from our That Suck Now What cards, and they're just for fun, right? So, and I have a lot of these. Now, what is something not many people know about you? Such a good question. All right. And we're breaking the ice here. And there's so many of these icebreakers, but I think these are really easy. So you can go into a conversation with small conversation starters prepared so that you are ready. And while it might feel awkward, maybe it's time to actually go first and be vulnerable and get vulnerable and, say, I'll go first, I'll share first, because then you are breaking up the ice. Okay, the third thing, especially when we're going to these events where maybe there's a lot of people, that you don't really know, maybe you're used to being home alone or not being in large groups in communities, practice your breath, connecting back to yourself. And I would add to this, imagine how that night is going to go. You can go into an imaginary mode, state, visualization, and envision the highest state of who you want to be and who is that person walking into the room full of people, and you are talking to 3 people that you've never met before, and the conversation's going great, and you're making them laugh, and you're actually building a true connection. So envision and notice how you actually feel in your body that you were able to do that. Oftentimes we hear this from athletes, we hear this from successful people who are great manifestors, who manifest a lot of things in their life. They are using these visualization techniques to envision what's that highest version of themselves that can show up to this party, that is not afraid of having conversations. And guess what? Social anxiety, poof, gone. Only because you were able to have these conversations and you're not worried about what's going to happen, or if you have an awkward silence. The last tip that I want to share here is, when you are communicating with someone and you're in a circle and you feel like that connection is complete, here's the thing. What most people do not realize is that you do not have to stay in the same group, small circle, small conversation the whole night. Don't be like the former version of myself. Don't be like my husband, the former version of my husband who would just stay with the same person, the same conversation the whole night when he wasn't even enjoying it. Here's what you can do. Well, thanks so much. It was so great to meet you. I'm going to go grab some appetizers. Or, a different way to do this is, well, thank you so much it was so great that you were sharing the story with me. I really loved our connection. If you'll excuse me, excuse yourself from the conversation. If you excuse me, I will go somewhere else, or I'm going to go get a drink. I'm going to go grab this. I'm going to go to the restroom, whatever you need to do, but excuse yourself so that conversation can feel complete. And I hear this from so many people where it's so hard to leave a group or a conversation that is not exciting them. And guys, people will understand that there's so many other people at this event or party or whatever gathering that you also want to know more people. When I am hosting events or meet and greets or parties, even at my home or at other places or within our organization, High Self Institute, if I am complete with a conversation, I would just thank the person. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for whatever you shared tonight. I really love this. Make a comment about them, make a compliment about them, honor them, acknowledge them, and then say, if you'll excuse me. And you don't even have to say anything else. Or pardon me, I'm going to go tend to other guests. Pardon me, I'm going to go say hi to some other people. Pardon me, I'm going to excuse myself. So there's so many ways to do this, but why are we so afraid of leaving that group? And that's the reason why we have social anxiety, because we just haven't practiced the art of mingling and the art of dancing around. I call it a dance when you're going to these events, because many times you're dancing through these groups of people. And I've also heard, well, Neeta, what if it's like I feel awkward barging into another group? Now you will feel the energy. And if you go into a group where everyone stops talking and they're either looking at you or you don't feel welcome because, hey, I've been there, we've all been there, then guess what? You can bring one of these conversation starters, these That's Like Now What cards, these conversation cards to a group and start asking, hey, I have these cards. Would you be open to sharing with me? Or I have something that I wanted to ask you. Or maybe making a compliment and then kind of having your in from there. Or how do you know the host? So something like that can actually break the ice, which goes back into point number 2 with having these pre-formed conversation starters, because then it is not so awkward. Then we are not so worried about going to these events. It's not going to cause that much anxiety because guess what? You have already pre-planned. And the only reason why it causes anxiety is because you are uncertain. Maybe you've gone through these things before and you were kind of like a deer in headlights and didn't understand or know how to mingle with someone and get to know someone. You're so in your head about what they would think, how they would judge you, what preconceived notions that they have, that you didn't even drop into your heart. So what if we actually dropped into our heart and say, what is one meaningful conversation I can have with somebody that is going to be for their highest good? And that is going to be the best conversation of the night. If you go in with that prayer, that intention, that vision, and visualize that happening, I guarantee that so many of these awkward conversations, awkward interactions will dissipate because you are setting your intention for good. And you're setting yourself for a meaningful conversation because you claimed it. You owned it. You envisioned it. You actually set that intention. I'm only going to go into this because I'm going to have a meaningful conversation that I can add value to. And so guess what? Because your intention is there, where your energy goes, attention flows, right? And so I think that's one of the key missing pieces that so often when we are afraid to go to these events, you want to check in with yourself. Am I afraid because I don't know the skills, or am I afraid because something bad has happened before that it left me feeling drained, it left me feeling awkward, it left me feeling alone and I didn't really connect with anyone, or I was connecting with people superficially and that's not really my jam, or I was just doing these niceties and I don't really care about knowing what people do for work, because guess what? I know we're doing the brave table and we are braving these conversations, and a lot of times people suck at having conversations. Like, do not come to a event and ask, like, what do you do for a living? That is the most lame, and I'm sorry, folks, whoever taught us this, like, let's throw that stuff out the window. That's why we have these cards, so that we can go beyond the veil of what do you do for work, or how did you get here? But oftentimes that is the one thing that makes us feel safe, right? When we are going to these things, we either like going to them because you are a great conversationalist and you know exactly why you are going. You're going because it's you want to meet new people, or maybe it's going to advance your career or whatever in some way, or you're just a social butterfly and you wanted to wear a cute outfit to this thing. And maybe because you know one person there, right? Whatever your reasoning is, but let's make it fun. Let's make it more juicy. Let's ask better questions. Let's go deeper beyond the layer of just what do you do? Please. And if you've come up with your own set of questions, I would love for you to share. Tag me on the Brave Table, comment below on YouTube, and let me know what you actually have navigated through, because I think it's so profound when we can actually go beneath the layer, and you never know, you can probably find maybe a partner, a lover, a best friend, a new hiking buddy, and somebody, because the one thing that you resisted going to actually ended up fueling you, and now they become a really big part of your life because you have created a meaningful relationship in some way, or you created a meaningful connection. And I think it's so powerful because, as we know, 47% of Americans now report that they do not have meaningful connections in their life. They can only count on one hand how many meaningful connections or personal relationships they have. And it's because we have to go deeper beyond what we are saying and asking and doing in these arenas where we're meeting people for the very first time, when it is, yes, scary, when it is uncomfortable. But what if we practice that beforehand? What if we're actually setting our intention, we're tuning into our hearts, and we're thinking, okay, what do I want to get out of this meet and greet? What do I want to get out of this networking event? Who do I want to meet here? Okay, 1 to 3 people. What do I want to know about them? How do I want to make them feel seen, heard, or understood? How can I add value to them? And when we're reframing all of this, then we know the reason why we're going to this thing, how we're going to show up, and maybe it might just be the best time of your life. So if you love this episode, I would love for you to share it with a friend, a family member. Tell me below what changed your perspective and what maybe you're going to be doing differently. If you're curious about other additional episodes, I've linked 3 additional ones in the show notes that will help with managing anxiety, understanding your emotions, how to emotionally regulate, and how to build your emotional resilience, especially in these interesting situations. I will link where to get the cards also in the show notes. And as always, during this holiday season, don't forget to be just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And I will see you soon.